Ashvin Parekh, Managing Partner at Ashvin Parekh Advisory. Mr. Parekh, thank you so much indeed for joining us. How have you read this move by the Reserve Bank of India to ask Dena Bank to stop lending? What would have prompted this move? Ira just mentioned this comes under the discretionary action taken by the Reserve Bank of India. What could have prompted it to take such an extreme measure?
Well, I mean, to begin with, I wouldn't even call it an extreme measure because, you see, Dena Bank has been suffering, from this challenge, for quite a while. They have burnt up a lot of their capital on NPAs in the past. And then, of course, there's something peculiar about this bank. I mean, for almost like 1 decade, it has been struggling with any particular financial model with which it can establish its niche or its role in the Western Indian market, where it is strongly present. I mean, basically, it's present between Maharashtra and Gujarat states. So it has been actually struggling, to be very honest, to establish some kind of a viability, kind of a niche for itself. I would say there are a few things. It used to be a traders bank at one point in time. They got into infrastructure funding. They've burnt a lot of money onto that. For Reserve Bank of India, there were very few options left. I mean, for the last 3 or 4 years, Dena Bank keeps on coming up again and again for different discretionary actions or the actions that the regulator or the government could have taken. Even the government under the Nationalized Banks Act could have really done in consultation with the RBI some kind of a forced merger. They were not doing that for all these years in the hope that this bank may find some way of sort of, working out of its problems, but it appears now that that's going to be too difficult. A very correct measure, I would say. The so-called narrow banking kind of an approach, its own, I mean, it has to be managed very well. It has its own set of challenges.
Right.
So, I mean, that's the kind of my first reaction to the whole thing.
Mr. Parekh, good afternoon. Ira joining in as well. Sir, just what you were saying, if you look at the basic numbers of Dena Bank, they are no better or no worse than a number of other banks in this PCA category, right? IDBI Bank being one of them. So I think the confusion that exists is whether Dena Bank was put in this category because of something outside of the numbers. And if so, would it not help if there was clarity on what exactly about Dena Bank prompted this action?
Yeah, so there were two parts to it. I mean, see, if you look at each bank, for example, it has, in fact, at least in case of, even the troubled ones, for example, let's say if you take IDBI Bank or if you take Bank of India, for example, each one of them have at least arrived at, IDBI has arrived at a retail banking kind of a plan. And there is a huge effort on the part of IDBI Bank in the last 2 years, particularly, to dispose of a lot of their unproductive assets, to also sell their NPAs, and then in addition to grow their retail banking. Dena Bank somehow or the other has not demonstrated that, the ability to move in a certain direction which would bring in more viability. So, Ira, it's more than the numbers. I suppose the ability on the part of the senior management really to demonstrate effectively that they have evolved a certain plan, and they stick to that plan, they work on that plan and to show numbers or results, basically. So, I mean, even the Bank of India, for example, is making a huge effort at this point in time. The kind of NPA recovery that they talk about, I mean, is certainly something that could give a little bit of comfort to the regulator and the government. Dena Bank, some of the other, you will agree with me, has not come out with any communication and any clear plan, saying that this is what exactly for the next 3 or 4 years they'll focus to do.
Sure. Mr. Parekh, in real terms, again, I'm not sure what this is going to mean, because if you look at the loan and deposit numbers of Dena Bank, so I think their loan book has degrown, their deposit base has also degrown, at least in the last financial year. I assume that, they'll try and protect their deposit base, but the loan book will continue to fall from here.
Yes, see, the loan book, I mean, since, of course, there is now a clear verdict from the regulator, so therefore they cannot really grow their loan book any longer. It has, and that's the point I was making earlier also, Gita, that it has its ramifications in two different sets of challenges. One is, if the economy, if the government believes and the regulator believes that the economy is now gradually on its uptake and gradually, in fact, more and more of investment, both from the public sector and the private sector will flow. in which case, let's say, curtailing credit may not be a good answer, because then what may happen is the adverse numbers start growing and they start staring in your eye till you reach a point where you reach a hard decision in saying, are you closing this organization up or are you going to merge it with something else? So that's one dimension of it. The other dimension is with credit curtailed, then the entire focus will then totally go to recovery. And therefore, a lot will depend on the kind of assets. I mean, this is where the regulator will have to, the bank will have to engage the regulator and the government in convincing the kind of loan book it has here. In terms of whether that loan book is capable of recovering in the next 1 or 2 years, or, for example, if you're sitting on infrastructure, let's say projects or investments which are stuck up for policy decisions, including, let's say, the distribution, let's say, of power, energy, and things like those, then you are really not helping yourself by curtailing your credit. Then, in fact, you are actually bringing your doom a little faster, basically.
The message this move makes, Mr. Parekh, is that all is not well with the bank. What then would depositors do? What if they start withdrawing their money? Wouldn't that be counterproductive?
No, I doubt whether that will really happen, with our deposit holders. And the reason why I believe is that, there is a huge amount of faith and comfort that people derive, saying that it's a sovereign entity, irrespective of whatever, it may happen, whatever shape or whatever challenges it may face. There's a belief that the government will put in that money, restore, the financial position to be in a position to make to the deposit holders' monies. So that, I doubt whether it could take that kind of a sharp shape, basically.
All right, Mr. Parekh, we leave it there. Many thanks for joining us. Ashvin Parekh on the Dena Bank issue. The stock is down about 7% in trade today.